work, but it's just being silly. It's not gonna work. Awesome. I guess I should get started here. Hi, welcome to... this is actually my second panel. I did a first panel. It was about anime and manga beyond the weeaboos. It was at a local con near me. And I decided that I wanted to go into a more historical, in-depth figures of things. There's a lot of stuff that a lot of people missed. And most of the people in this room probably got into this whole scene probably around the Toonami era, which you may not or may know that there's been a little bit of a history of things, otaku culture in the past like 40 or 50 years. Although it didn't always have the same name and it didn't always have the same memes in it. Oh, this is an introduction to me. I go by the handle Shinden9, or Circle 9. I have been unemployed for 2 years, so I've had a lot of time to research this kind of stuff. Oh, I didn't change that. Yeah, I do military cosplays because I can't be an adorable little girl. Sort of a moe otaku. Didn't make any of these images in the presentation. And I'm proud to be an otaku, and I want to tell you why you should be as well. Although if you're here, you probably are, and you probably have gotten over it. Yep. And I've noticed there's been a lot of panels that have not really gone over the history of being an otaku, where it comes from and stuff. There's a lot of people who go into in-depth, and it's really important because that's an important part of otaku subculture, is that we analyze the things that we like, that we take more of an interest in things like this. And, but nobody really goes into like, way back when my grandfather was watching Jungle Emperor, or my uncle was watching Star Blazers and getting me into it, or my dad is talking about Speed Racer all the time. I think it's important that we know about ourselves and where we come from and who may be amongst us. There could be that old guy who got into it back in like the old Tezuka Astro Boy times. Yeah, you're right. You should sit. Alright, first question, what is an otaku? You probably already know. You probably don't know a lot, or you probably do know a lot. I shouldn't make assumptions. First of all, otaku is a term used by people and not used by people who have little to no idea what it means. There's some people who's online who are like, I'm an avid cosplayer, I do this, I go to like 5 cons a year, but I'm not an otaku because I don't want to kill people, or I'm not an otaku because I'm not a nerd. Who are you lying to? Understand the history of the otaku subculture. You need to know 2 things. A, what is an otaku? B, what has affected, affects, and will affect the subculture. And C, what we as otaku can ensure success in our subculture in the Japanese visual arts industry. An otaku in Japan is a person with a certain obsessive hobby. It can be anything, military stuff, anime otaku, manga otaku, animation otaku, people who make their own animations. It's a wide subculture. It could be like idol otaku, history otaku. Usually, I'll get to that. It's derived from a stilted, archaic way of referring to other people. It was used by most of the people at Comiket, and people have noticed that, oh, that's like the mainstream Japanese noticed that they use that word a lot, and they were like, oh, nobody uses that in real speech, so let's just call them otaku. They have a bad rep. Over the past 30 years or so, the Japanese media has not taken lightly to them. There have been people who have committed murders and heinous things, and they find all of these anime DVDs or video cassettes back in the day in their rooms, and they say, oh, that must have what started it. And actually something like that happened here recently. I don't know his name, but he was a blogger online, and he killed his entire family, and everybody's saying it must be the anime. He watched an anime called Slayers. That must have told him to kill his parents. Do you know? It was seriously, the news article said Slayers, and it's like, do you know what you're talking about? Because they've been shunned so much, they've sort of become social recluses as a, I guess, I don't want to say a victim of society, but a lot of them can be. You've seen NEET for a second time. Does anybody know what NEET means?
Non-educational.
Yes, not engage in education, employment, or training. It's not fun. You, depending on who you are, you might have health problems after a while staying inside all the time, and you might lose your memory a little bit. I'm so depressing. What an otaku in the United States and most of the Western world is, it's different, like how anime in Japanese and anime in the English lexicon mean different things. Like in Japan, anime can be any animation, like what Disney did or what you can find online, flash animation, stuff like that. The word entered the English lexicon around 1993 when it was introduced by anime licensors and was the cover story of the first issue of Wired magazine. 1993 is also around the time where Otaku started. Otaku were Japanese visual arts and culture fanatics who are sometimes ostracized from society and form tight communities with others like them. Does that sound familiar? A small minority is openly childish, obnoxious, and are only fans of a small amount of J media, like... Sorry about that. Perfume. They'll only be fans of a certain few things, or only the stuff that Funimation comes out with, and it's just there's a whole broad array of things, especially right now with the internet. They can be found in other places in the East as well. A lot of them are in Taipei, Hong Kong. If you've ever been on eBay, you'll notice that a lot of dealers come from Hong Kong, and they're mostly not wrong. Also in Korea, there has been a otaku boom that kind of started in the 80s, but until relatively recently, there's been strict media import laws against it. But it is a culture that's sort of flourishing there. The minority is seen in most of society. One of the rules that I like about one of the littler cons that I go to is how you act is how we are all perceived, or something along those lines. I forget what the exact words are, but basically it's if one person acts like a complete moron while in cosplay, everybody in that mall out there is going to be so annoyed with us every year. So it's just the one bad apple ruins the bunch. When little attention comes to our subculture, it can be backhanded and at best and extremely derisively critical at worst. Some otaku deny that they are otaku, as I said before, because they think that the entirety of Japan thinks otaku is a bad word when it's just the media. It's do you trust what Fox News says about most of the things like this? It just doesn't work. They fail to understand that the word is a little bit different here. It's just a nerd who's interested in Japanese pop culture. Are you an otaku? You may be an otaku if you spend every moment not spend eating, studying, working, or sleeping, playing net games, watching anime, reading manga, or planning your cosplay. You spend $50 to go to a convention for a weekend, and you know what tsundere is. Westerners, sometimes, and it's just, not a lot of Westerners are really ignorant, but there's a lot of people who unfortunately ruin it for the rest of us. Sometimes some people's moms who are like, oh, don't you like Chinese cartoons? Or, oh, aren't you learning Japanese? I'm going to buy you like 50 books in Thai. That's the same thing, they're all squiggly, right? Some of us are picked on by our families, like our mothers who threw out our perfectly good, healthy leftover udon soup left over from the night where we went to a Japanese restaurant before because they didn't trust those Chinese, Japanese, whatever they are. I don't see the difference in people making food for us Americans and made me eat their split-piece ham hock soup and that congealed into some sort of gelatin and tasted like bacon grease and semen, and maybe gain 2 pounds, spend the rest of the day on the toilet, and break out in a rash. This didn't happen to me. Otaku in Japan and the West have similarities. Some are neat, shut in, or socially inept, not all. In fact, sort of little of us are like that in the US, and increasingly more mainstream people are interested, in Japan, increasingly more mainstream people are interested in otaku interests. Southern workers are the contribute to society, overrated. Some have a greater attraction to 2D than 3D. This means some people who have pseudo-relationships with characters. Keeps you away from STDs and you don't have unplanned pregnancies, so that's cool. We're slowly creeping up the ladder to 18 plus here. Most collect items like DVDs, drama CDs, manga volumes, figures. Most are part of some sort of community, like online, offline, people get interested in things. Many create or consume fan works. Doujinshi, anybody familiar with Comic-Con knows what Comic-Con is. Distinguishing between their subculture and the normals, or muggles, or mundane people. I prefer normals, even when the distance is shrinking between us. We're targets of criticism for some ignorant people. Akihabara is in Tokyo. It's a sort of an otaku town. Nipponbashi in Osaka is also an otaku town. Everybody who's ever been to Akihabara, or Akihabara, however you want to say it, I'm going to anglicize it. They say it's a definite place you have to go while you're in Japan, especially if you're an otaku, of course. Events are an overarching term in Japan for conventions, get-togethers, press conferences, sales, doujinshi markets, and other things. Comic-Con is the largest event. It's a comic market held twice a year, and if you go on places like Faku.com and stuff, all of the stuff that comes from there basically comes from Comic-Con. The Japan Science Fiction Convention was really big in the 70s and 80s, and it sort of really drove home the fact that we are different from the mainstream and we have very different interests. Anybody who's heard of Daikon, the Daikon 3 and 4 animations? Major things that were made by a few animation students in their basement, and then they went on to make, Gainax, but I thought there was another. Oh, yes, this is here in our sphere of influence. Anime conventions, events in the West, which are pretty broad. Very few anime conventions in the US do not have a growing annual attendance rate. Anime Boston has not broken their record every year, I'm pretty sure, if I look through the history correctly. And it should be around 20 to 21,000 people this year. I hope so. Anime Boston is the largest anime convention in the Northeast US. It's been running for 10 years. Anime Expo is the largest convention outside of Japan. It's in Los Angeles. It has a high industry attendance. Timeline. What we know what Otaku is, we can go over timeline of the subculture and its origins, going way back to before that Meiji era. Hokusai, who made the very famous painting of Mount Fuji with a tsunami going on, or not going over it, but I think you guys would know that. He coined the term manga, which means whimsical images, back in the mid to late 1800s. It would not be used extensively for Japanese comics until around the 1940s and 50s. Some manga were Buddhist-made printings of anthropomorphic animals engaged in Buddhist prayer, chores, blah, blah, blah. These inspired people like Walt Disney to make, basically it was the beginning of anthropomorphization of animals into humans. That's what I mean. Cat girls more smart than you think. In the Meiji to Taisho eras, Pochi-e comics began becoming popular. They sort of started as like really simplified, sort of what manga is today. It was a big thing. Most people who were cultural analysts in like the early 1900s would notice how there's so many people in Japan who were so interested in these just basically comics, and it really started to boom afterwards. In the Showa era, in 1943, the first feature-length anime in Japan, Momotaro's Divine Sea Warriors, was a propaganda film. It was during a time where most other nations were using cartoons as propaganda. Major people who did this were Warner Brothers. Looney Tunes cartoons would be shown before newsreels in the 1940s in the US. And they'd be like, buy war bonds, look at Bugs Bunny give grenades shaped as popsicles to Japanese soldiers and watch them blow up. You know him. He found this sort of he sort of found this really interesting world of different comics and cartoons and animations and stuff, and he was inspired by Disney. He actually watched these cartoons while hanging out with occupied U.S. forces. In the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, long career, many series, including but not limited to seinen, shonen, adult comics, hentai, practically invented the shoujo genre. His notable works include Astro Boy and Blackjack. Also, he made a show called Jungle Emperor, which would later be ripped off by Disney as The Lion King. And Josh really, really disagrees with me there. 1960s, Western and post-war Japan had two options for entertainment. One was importing foreign films, and in a time when you're like, yeah, these people are sort of invading my culture, I don't really want to open up to them. But the alternative was Japanese domestic films, which acting was pretty terrible. Camera angles were pretty terrible. They really depended later on special effects, like, this is in the 50s and stuff too. Everybody makes fun of Godzilla because they didn't have anything else to entertain themselves. Japanese live-action films weren't taken seriously even by the Japanese at sometimes. In Japan, these films were viewed as bad quality, low acting. Foreigners were played by Japanese actors with dyed hair, which is kind of funny. They still do that now, but I think it's sort of a tongue-in-cheek kind of making fun of it. In the West, Toho films, not Toho like UNO and Toho, like, yeah. Films like Godzilla were viewed as being comedic in the West. Even today, many people don't take Godzilla seriously, making rubber suits with zippers jokes. I'm sure you've heard those. Japan's answer to this was to override the limiter with animation. Any angle, prop, setting, or cast was possible. Anime as we know it today began in the 1960s. In science fiction settings and became wildly popular as the alternative to bad live-action film. And depending on who you ask, they will say that there have been 5 basic waves of Japanime loving in the West, specifically the US. I included them only because a lot of people agree with it, and there seems to not be a standardization, but a lot of people agree with some of these dates and names cartoons. So Western Wave Corner here, the TV syndication wave in the US through 1965 about to 1973 about, Astro Boy, Speed Racer era. Most fans did not know that the Japanese origins of these cartoons, so technically this isn't even an Otaku wave. These anime were targeted at children, and today not a lot of people who watch these, attend these cons, and view this type of animation as simply children's shows. Like, you're not, and maybe some of you will go to a SpongeBob SquarePants convention in like 20 years, but whatever. Into the 70s, sci-fi becomes increasingly popular. This sort of peaked with Star Wars, and I actually did write that down. Western interest in anime begins. Licensing sort of begins in the 70s. Leiji Matsumoto, you've probably heard. He gets big with Space Battleship Yamato and Galaxy Express 39s. Anime fandom begins to split from sci-fi fandom in Japan because they usually went to the same conventions and they start splitting off. In 1975, the comic market, Japan's famous biannual Doujinshi Festival, the largest in the world, begins. Today it's more widely known as Comic-Con. 1977, the cartoon/fantasy organization begins in the US. It was one of the first official anime clubs. It got really big, and it started in like California. It got really big, and then suddenly there was like the leadership had a lot of infighting, and it sort of died down in the 1989. And now it's literally like 10, 15 people who meet in this guy's basement, and most of them are furries. So it's kind of interesting to see how things can evolve so quickly and devolve so quickly. Space Battleship Yamato in 1977 as well is localized in the US as Star Blazers and becomes the first true translated anime to be released in the United States. Because before this, it was either completely Americanized or didn't come here at all. And Space Battleship Yamato, besides being really heavily edited and including a scene where they're eating sushi, and you can see them eating sushi, and they have chopsticks eating sushi, but they call it chocolate cake in the dub. And names are changed. They changed the name of Space Battleship Yamato to Argus? Argo, thank you.
The Argo.
I could tell you're going to be the one who know this. I'm sorry. I must be an embarrassment. Japanimation wave in the late 1970s, early 1980s. This is where Battle of the Planets sort of came into being. It was called Gatchaman in Japan, and it kind of turned into something completely different. The first Western equivalent of Otaku emerged, and most of this wave was science fiction themed. Creates for Space Battleship Yamato, success go on to create Macross Frontier. Is that right? It is.
Macross.
Macross.
Period. Probably. Sorry. Macross period?
I think so. Yeah, you're right. Sorry, I made some mistakes. Otaku begins to be used extensively to refer to the subculture of anime, manga and anime fans in Japan, doujinshi makers, and people with intense nerdy interests. American anime boom becomes mainstream, however, is not really taken seriously because of... this is weird, I thought I'd put this in the slideshow too. Captain Harlock debacle. Begins a widespread American misconception that all Japanese entertainment is weird and serves as little more than comedy, even when the comedy was made by people who did not know what was going on. Literally, Gatchaman and Captain Harlock, they didn't translate it. They literally just watched what was going on and made up whatever dialogue they wanted to make up. And this is pretty awful, and in some cases it's still happening today. Localized anime is caused by, in most normals. Think of anime as badly lip-dubbed cartoons with silly named characters and strange creatures, while the art is very different from these misconceptions. And everything about it, like finding tentacle hentai for anybody who looks for it, it's not that common. Basically, all American stereotypes of Japanese entertainment come from this event. The anime boom really picks up early 80s. 1981 through 83, Daikon 3 opening and Daikon 4 opening are made and presented to the science fiction convention in Japan in those days. They'd later go on to grow to become the anime giant Gainax. We have this following out me and Gainax. 1984, Studio Ghibli releases Nausicaa? I don't know if I should pronounce that A differently.
No.
I welcome your criticism and feedback. No, I do.
Okay, there's this film called Hecklers. I saw it a couple years ago. I understand.
No, I want feedback. Seriously, I want to grow on this and I want to present it.
It's
well.
Ghibli.
Ghibli.
And, the original word was Ghibli. Miyazaki screwed up Ghibli, so they pronounced it Ghibli. And Nausicaa is the way you did say it. All
right, Nausicaa. I'm doing this all for the first time. Most of this stuff has been in text for me. Ghibli with Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, it was pretty big. Ghibli later becomes the most internationally respected animation studio not only in Japan, but in the world. 1989, the Showa period ends, the Heisei period begins. This notes a cultural impact because the Showa era was during a time where a lot of Japan's population died off because of that huge war that happened. And Japan completely changed from the Showa era, the early Showa era to the late Showa era. The cartoon and fantasy organization disbands as an international organization and becomes a club in a basement mainly attended by furries. Literally, the guy who runs it says, "Call me on my cell phone, but you can only call me during the actual meetings because I don't get reception in my mom's basement." Western Wave Corner, 1983 to 1989 was the new Japanimation wave. Transformers and Robotech were sort of what brought this on big. Macross didn't really come in during this time very much. There were dwindling space science fiction themes, and they were replaced by more terrestrial science fiction themes. And alright, now we get to the 1990s. 1991, the Miyazaki Tsutomu incident happens where a self-proclaimed otaku murdered 4 girls. I don't know if he actually proclaimed that he was an otaku, but he had DVDs, so he must be one of those terrible people. The next 2 bullet points are actually together, I found out. Otaku no Video has released a comedic but somewhat educational anime about the history of otaku to that point in certain interpretations. It's also a sort of liberal, hey, this is how Gainax happened, and how we started off as like a garage kit company, and then we started being huge. Anyway, 1992, Portrait of an Otaku, a series of short videos speaking about the ills of otaku culture and its future by interviewing anonymous otakus, released. Anonymous and possibly staged, where they openly admit to not being bound by morals and admit to thinking murderous and suicidal thoughts, having disdain for society, and even stealing animation cells and committing crimes, furthering otaku resentment in Japan. This actually was part of Otaku no Video, I found out later. Many people begin getting internet connections and BBS users begin booming in number. 1994 peaked the period where otaku were persecuted, from what I've read, as mentally unstable, childish, crime-prone, curable, and generally unfit for society. Neon Genesis Evangelion creates a huge boom internationally. Otakon begins, 1997, Akihabara fully shifts from being a tech parts district to an otaku model and video district. Soon it becomes the largest collection of otaku goods stores in the entire world. 1998, Toonami, Cartoon Network's anime block begins. This is how a vast majority of today's American otaku started off loving anime. Western Wave Corner, number 4, the first otaku wave from 1990 to 1995, possibly over to 2000. marked the beginning of the fan subbing, in a way, and VHS piracy, bringing unedited anime to the Western stage. This is basically where everybody was like, wait a second, things have been wrong for the past 30 years. It's sort of the beginning of the subtitle preferred generations. Some people would actually buy, at conventions and things, they'd buy like a booklet, which was all the lines, and they'd actually watch the animation and read what was going on in the translation. First networking Otaku generation. This is basically how Otaku really started up. Themes were extremely varied, marked by the first Sailor Moon fans as well as the first major manga collectors. Not manga that you know today, but flopped manga. 2000s, we're getting into an interesting area. That spreads otakuism like wildfire. Otaku culture boom bridges Japanese and overseas otaku to the same memes and show critiques. Memes. Otaku YouTube, Nika Doga, torrenting, bring a huge amount of anime and manga to people. Anime conventions pop up around the world, decade marked by a lot of slice of life stuff and moe shows. It's a far cry from the science fiction and fantasy world of doom themes that dominated anime for 50 years before. So yeah, you can see a difference between things like Space Battleship Yamato and K-On! Just a little bit. 2001, Azumanga Daioh was animated, heralding the beginning of an era where the already established slice of life and moe archetypes, even though moe wasn't really used as the term, have a huge fan base. In 2003, the moe boom really starts to begin. 4chan in 2003 was a website emulating Japan's 2chan, founded by a 2chan? I'm not sure. Channel. Okay. Founded by a 15-year-old moot with his mother's credit card. Several boards are related to Japanese animation and games, like JP, which is terrible, and A, which is terrible, and the Empire Source, which is terrible. First Anime Boston makes waves for being the most successful first-year convention ever. They were expecting that they'd get maybe like 200, 300 people, and they ended up getting over like 700, 800, almost 1,000. 2004, how did he and Lucky Star pick up, defining the 2000s brand of J Visual Arts? Kyoto Animation begins their domination with some of the most acclaimed anime about seemingly absolutely nothing. This is not really critically acclaimed as much as it is fan acclaimed, and it's sort of because of the moe boom. 2005, Densha Otaku peaks a better view of otaku in mainstream Japan because it's so cool to be an otaku now. Which is sort of what happened with being a nerd around the same time in the United States. A view mirrored by a Japanese government's program to export otaku culture to the world by branding it Cool Japan. 2007, Vocaloid releases Hatsune Miku, beginning Vocaloid boom that makes waves in the otaku subculture worldwide. That's your wave quarter number 5. The second otaku wave starting around 1997 and kind of around now, but I cut it off in 2007. You can disagree with that. Marked by the availability of certain anime and Toonami, major localizing boom. Most congoers are from this generation. Internet streaming and high production costs, well, today's congoers, not yesterday's congoers, but internet streaming and high production costs start to strain localizers like ADV, Funimation. It ends with little fanfare because it still kind of hasn't ended, but it's marked by a decrease in appeal in the mainstream after licensors go under and manga sections shrink and dwindle. Borders, remember Borders? They were responsible to anywhere between a fifth and a third of all manga sales in the United States, and they went under. Sort of begins and ends with Toonami, in my opinion. The 2000s, 2008, the Akihabara incident, a van-grabbing, knife-wielding sociopath killed 7 people on enclosed Shuodori's Avenue in Akihabara. ADV stopped manga production. And I think they stopped anime production too. Tokyo Pop lays off half of its staff and drops some titles. E-readers start to become popular. Foreign feminist groups begin campaigns against portrayals of women in a small fringe of manga, anime, and games, demanding censorship of all manga and bans on sales on certain games rated Zero Z. How to Ge Season 2 contains a 14-episode season with 8 episodes having the exact same events repeated each episode.
Yay!
And Josh made me sit through it not once when I watched it myself, but twice because he wanted to watch it too.
Yay, Josh!
So it was endless 16 for me. Toonami is canceled, replaced by Adult Swim airing anime on the weekend or whenever they feel like it, and being pretty backhanded about it.
It's coming back.
2000, supposedly. I hope so. I mean, like, I'm so jealous of these kids who weren't dragged down with me, so. 2009, ADB stops all production. 2010, Ishihara, the governor of Tokyo, proposes a manga ban and makes public speeches where he calls manga creators and otaku subhuman, while never being punished for his remarks. He said some really terrible things about a lot of people. And the manga bans were basically on anybody who seemed like they were in high school age, like engaged in anything remotely sexual, from like, in some extreme cases, they could say that you can't have panty shots anymore. 2011, Shikari Ishihara introduces censorship bill targeting manga and anime, but ignoring porn and literature. Bill would prevent certain manga and anime from even being sold at the largest metropolitan area on the planet. This is Tokyo Prefecture, as opposed to the rest of Japan, because he doesn't have a jurisdiction on the rest of Japan. But let's face it, 300 million people are in that little metropolitan area, and that accounts for, yes, sir.
25 million?
25 million? Did I say 30 million? Or
You said 300.
300, Jesus. No. Ignore what I said. I'm in a different decimal system here. About 25 million people. 300. That's more than the entire population of the United States.
Not quite, but it is, but the population of Japan is only about 129.
125, 129, yeah. Jesus. That was an oversight. Glasses. Manga bans pass. The East Japan disaster takes the lives of 19,000 people, forces almost 400,000 from their homes, leaves thousands homeless, and leaves Japan with a nuclear disaster taking 40 years to fully contain. Yeah, it's a pretty big deal. The Japanese yen goes from a steady 100 yen, around there, to $1 to under 70 yen to $1, which is kind of bad for an export economy because if we want things from Japan, we have to pay more with our dollars to get more of their yen. Tokyopop goes under in the US. That was impressive. 2011, Borders, the second largest single supplier of US manga sales, making up to a third of all manga sales in the US, shuts down, where the entire chain focuses on online sales with a parent company. Why did I put that in? China retrofits an offensive-capable Ukrainian aircraft carrier, being a threat to not only Japan, but Taiwan. Because the main reason they haven't been able to attack Taiwan is because their People's Liberation Army Navy can't get there. The Aya Hirano scandal? You know who Aya Hirano is?
What actually happened with that? Is that not entirely clear?
There was a picture that surfaced of her supposedly naked with one of her band members, and then there was supposedly another one that came out. And a lot of otaku are really creepy where they expect the voice actresses to be like their characters, and when you have the person who did Haruhi and Konada, that can get you some enemies. She has roles now, but she also had some health problems that kind of surfaced when she posted pictures of herself on Twitter saying, "Hey, I have this big bald spot and all of my glands are not working, so..." Self-Defense Forces and the Ministry of Defense's act. Tokyo Kid in Cambridge, Mass. Closes due to unsustainable business and high price of imported goods and high shipping prices.
When the hell did that happen?
When did that happen? That happened on Christmas.
What?
I know! Seriously, I came down here with Josh and I was like, "Hey, guess what? I'm gonna go to Tokyo Kid with Josh." And then Tokyo Kid was like, "Lol, we're closing soon." And I'm like, "What the hell?"
Look at the search for the thread on the AB forum.
Yeah, that is actually really informational. This guy should be co-hosting. Please do give me feedback because I'd like to expand on this. And I know there's a lot of problems here. K-pop popularity in the US surpasses J-pop popularity. SNSD is featured on live television in the US, which may have an overshadowing of Korean things over Japanese things. May disagree with me on that. 2012, manga sales declined in Japan to the lowest level since the 1990s, according to some studies. Bandai Entertainment stops producing licensed anime because of Japanese fears of piracy, because a lot of people torrent things, and I'm not going to tell you how to torrent. Don't do it. SOPA and PIPA fail, but mark the beginning of a trend of legislative attacks on file sharing and content publication. Anime streaming and file sharing sites begin shutting down at a high rate because of this. They were like, oh, SOPA's gone, okay, we're going to go now because the whole media fire thing, where, yeah, that didn't work. Mega Upload. I'm sorry, I'm not thinking right now. Comiket shows record low attendance growth. Low attendance growth, meaning it didn't grow as much as it was supposed to, but it still was a high attendance rate. Tokyo Anime Fair shows record low attendance, mainly because it was run by Ishihara, who was the same guy who called manga makers subhuman. 2015, a young Marty no, that doesn't. All right. 2095, a man from 1981 travels. No, that was the Yellow album. 2199, Space Battleship. No, this is another. Although this one's important because this is when Case Closes ending. 2012, Anime Boston is themed on the apocalypse. And is it any wonder? After the bad news that's been coming into me, a lot of us. The future, what it holds, and what we need to do. And this is mainly from here, it's going to be suggestions, but I'm not an authority on this. But you can heed it, take it or leave it. What are the problems with the current licensing system? While there have been many changes in the way anime is translated and marketed in the US market, the system has changed kind of little. The Captain Harlock system, while we do have translations and subs that are accurate for most of the time, sometimes it's still open and prone to a lot of interpretations by the localizers. Trustworthy subtitles, translations, and dubs are sometimes hard to find. The licensors seem to not be able to find a happy medium between the 4Kids localization and Sugoi, that Tsukumizu makes you look so kawaii, Tomoko-chan. And I think a few of you have seen this one. This also goes out to fans, subbers. And this is my Western Wave corner. Might be a sixth Otaku community wave. The internet streamers and torrenters overseas can get anime within hours of broadcast. Subbing and translating are handled by networks of otaku communities such as forums, Goro, image boards, and DBSs may make a boom. Maybe marked by the end of major localizing projects, the spread of online piracy, and more otaku taking interest in Japanese language, which might be a good thing. The otaku community in the West may become a self-sufficient cloud fandom, not the character, but the buzzword that cloud computing, so it's a cloud fandom, I guess, capable of translating, communicating, importing merchandise, file sharing, and advertising all together, making a gigantic boom, because it's basically all going to be free. The bad part of this is the Japanese anime industry will not make a single cent off of this. So we might become a gigantic leech. I don't suggest that happening. The best thing would be if one of two systems are installed. Both of them look unlikely for several reasons. Tighter communication between localizers and original studios to maintain the unedited true translation of the show, eliminating the bastardization some of the industry leaders condone under creative licensing. ADV did this with Ghost Stories. It wasn't officially released abridged. Mind you, they did release accurate subtitles and stuff, but basically Japan said, this is so terrible, do whatever the hell you want with it. And they did. It's a fun thing to watch, but...
It was funny as hell, but it was the original.
Yeah, I do agree with that, but I don't want this to become a pattern. Anime should be published, or the second option would be anime should be published in the US through streaming sites by the original publishers in Japan, eliminating the middleman. This is unlikely for a multitude of reasons, mainly the Japanese industry. Not knowing too much about us and are kind of scared of us. But yeah, if Uniqlo can come to talk to, yes?
Yeah, I was gonna say, they are still just like, what the heck, you guys like this stuff? You're nuts.
Yeah.
Trust me on this one, I got all sorts of looks walking the streets of Akihabara last year.
Yeah.
They looked at me like, what the hell are you doing in here? And I would go up to the shops and I'd say something like, Trumpu, which is like, playing cards. And they'd be like, they sort of give me this look of,
Save yourself.
I'm serious, dead serious.
They should have a big banner like in Haneda Airport just saying, save yourself. What does the future hold? So far, otaku booms all over the world have tended to follow a pattern of waves. And doing more research into this, I kind of disagree with the numbers I put here. Booms tend to fade out at a slow rate, evening out around the last year of the decade. The recent boom was sort of a bit larger than others because of networking, but it faded out around, or internationally, it faded around 5 years after beginning. This is probably because of the economy or the fact that if you look at characters like Yoshiko Miyaguchi from Strike Witches, next to that girl from Taisho Baseball Girls, next to Yasuno Uribe from Please Call Me Baby, they all look and act the same. No, go back, please. The last boom didn't center around a single show, really, because a lot of people were looking for the next Eva. And they're like, when is the next Evangelion going to come out? It's like, no, it's not going. With any luck, the next Otaku boom will happen sometime around early 2014, 2013. In a world where the internet allows talented individuals to publish things independently and less people are favoring ink and paper and DVDs, what is the next wave of Otaku generation around the world? I think visual novels and webcomics. This is purely speculation on my part, but I've talked to some people and they say this has power. This one is a Western one called Katao Shoujo, or Katao Shoujo. I don't have, it's all text to me. It's all text to me. VN's fan comics and webcomics. Hitalia started as a webcomic. Katao Shoujo could make a huge boom in Japan if they're not like, it's about crippled girls. Your Americans are so mean. Did both Aaron and Clanna had anime, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Another one for you. Yumekuri Mary also started off as the same way.
Sorry?
Yumekuri Mary, Dream Eater Mary. Same way. Started out as a webcomic, or I should say a fan comic.
All right, I'll look into that, actually. Thank you very much. Anime fandom and the industry may have a closer relationship than ever before, as the internet and fan works blur the line between professional and amateur. Now it won't be a matter of whether you're lucky or whether you got licensed, it'll be a matter of skill, which would be nice. The past 18 years, people have been looking for the next Evangelion, the next anime to cause a boom, the next anime to make you lie awake at night and say, why? I don't think there will be another Evangelion, because at that time, anime was sort of coming of age, but the thing was, it was highly experimental, this animation, and I don't think we should be looking at the pinnacle of Japanese animation as a show that lost money before they could air the final episode. I mean, we ignore things that, not all of us, but a lot of people ignore things that really have an impact. Gurren Lagann, which was sort of on the mecha wave from the 1980s, it sort of tried to revive that, and it just the power and raw motivation is just the art of making the mundane magical and feels provoking that is brought to us by slice of life. the crazy daily life comedies that have been popping up all over the place, like Nichijou and Danshi, Kokosei no Nichijou. The godlike awe of Haruhi Suzumiya, the amazing art of so many series by Kyoani and others. If you really stopped and appreciated these new anime, you would realize that this all is just so good. I understand that Evangelion had a really good story, but in some ways it was nice and we should appreciate it, but we shouldn't look for that in everything. It wasn't really like that before, and it's not going to be like that very much after. Anyway. What I think you should take away from this panel, being Otaku have a right and a responsibility to defend the right to each of the following: access to accurately subbed manga, subtitled anime, or anime with accurate dub scripting, if you prefer dubs and you don't want to read your cartoons. 2, the ability to purchase any anime license in the US should the licensors cease and desist all file sharers and streaming websites that carry fan subs, like how sometimes Funimation will be like, hi, you're doing a fan sub of something we just got the licensing rights to, so stop it and delete this, please. And we're going to wait about 4 or 5 months to come out with it, so everybody's going to have like a lack of ways to do that, so they're basically forced to do things CD, torrent. The ability to purchase in a physical print form, or if you prefer digital. Manga license in the US in a timely and orderly fashion. The ability to read or watch, because there's a lot of, the pain of having a manga that only gets translated a year after it comes out in Japan, or even more. The ability to read or watch manga or anime in fan subs should the project be dropped by the licensor because the licensors hold operations. I don't know if ADV still does C&D on some of the fan subs, but they are part of the parent company. I don't understand the reason, but sometimes you can't find. The right to have a feasible way to directly support a series and the original artist. I'm a high supporter in this, or high believer in this. If it comes to the point where you want to buy manga from Japan and it costs $14 for something that is like 600 yen, I suggest doing it if you're really hardcore and you aren't, or if you are going to make your payments on your house or whatever. Otaku have a responsibility to support a work as much as they feel necessary. If you like it, you should support it. If you don't like it, then don't support it. It's just represent the subculture as professionally as possible, refraining from public outbursts or furthering misconceptions about the subculture of Japanese visual arts. I'm not telling you what to do, just please don't glomp people from the mall or on the T.
Don't shout, I like yaoi in Boston Comic.
They do.
Yeah, there was a picnic that some enemy Boston fans set up, and people were shouting, "I like yaoi, I like hentai," and I came there with
I know who organized that.
I came there with bottled sparkling cider and nice sandwiches and things like that. And,
Just enjoy your cosplaying in a fashionable way. I used to be in the Hetalia fandom, and then the Hetalia fandom was taken over by the person who ran my anime club in my old school, and that wasn't fun. Whenever she was absent, she would always play things like Black Butler and Hetalia all the time. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to tell you, like when she was absent for a couple weeks, I was like, all right, Gurren Lagann and Haruhi, or anything else you guys want to see, and everybody was so happy about it. You know who I'm talking about, not name dropping. Contribute to the fandom. Pursue interest in a morally fashionable way. Don't support people who make money off of a work they did not create, and do not plan to compensate the original creators for. There was a scanlating website which was actually making money off of the manga without actually giving money to the original creators. And that's bad, because you didn't make this, you shouldn't make money off of it. Contribute to the fandom as much as possible. Suggest new titles, make good fan art, expand at a comfortable rate, but do not force titles. Like, you know that kid who was in school who would always be like, oh my god, have you seen this? Oh my god, have you seen this? And he'd always come up to you at lunch and it was just really annoying. And it's like, I don't really think I'd like Fushigi Yugi, I'm sorry. I guess there's just this little part of me who just doesn't think it'll work. Show discomfort towards title butchering, westernization, inaccurate subtitles, and whitewashed Hollywood adaptations. Akira might have a live-action remake set in Neo Manhattan.
No!
Also, Death Note. Death Note.
What?
Yes.
That's not a thing.
No,
That's not a thing, is it? That's not going to be a thing, is it?
They secured the rights to it.
Let's go jump off bridges.
No.
Yes.
No.
No, yes.
No, because there will be none of us who. Everybody will be like, oh, what happened? What was this from? Must be something original. Do not support hoggish criticism of the subculture, although it may be funny. J-Pop America Fun Time Now really kind of set me back in my family because they were like, oh, I don't know much about Craig, he just likes Japanese things and stuff. And then they were like, oh, this Saturday Night Live skit just clears up everything. And I'm like, all right, so I might like Sensei Mark a little bit because he's better, but it's just, I didn't like that. And there was a second one that came out too.
There's three.
There's three?
There's three.
So about
They're
that
fucking
bridge. Most important things we need to do. 1, pursue your interests. 2, discuss your interests. 3, promote your interests. 4, be a part of the community. 5, create if you have skills. 6, most importantly, while you're here, have fun. Because... and it's true.
I agree in the entirety. I agree in the entirety.
All right, just some highly suggested reading. I picked this up on a whim when Borders was closing. Some of you might recognize it, some of you might not. If you're in a rural area, you're like, what is this thing? Information is up there. Suggested anime and manga detailing otakuism. Genshiken was really good. Otaku no video. Ori no Imoto. Lucky Star, even though there's only a few characters who are otaku, kind of humorously just, and this is a manga that you can't really find translated here unless you go online. Otaku no Musume-san, daughter of an otaku. It's funny. It's one of my favorites, actually. Yes, sir.
There's a panel tomorrow, anime fans and anime. I have nothing to do with it, but I thought that would be appropriate to this.
Yes. I'll look up the information on that, and that's the end of it. What time is it? I have 15 minutes, so this is like a good discussion time. Well, this is the first time I've done this this content. I have done one panel before, so I'm kind of a little bit antsy still. Yes, sir.
I actually do agree with you with the tsunami thing.
Yeah.
Once tsunami ended,
Yeah, I sort of noticed that myself.
without tsunami, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah, me too.
I would probably still be reading my sci-fi books in a corner, huddled behind a wall, which is